Hello and happy Friday. Hopefully this is working. Is there anyone there? Can anyone hear me? Well, I'm going to assume I'm live anyway and just talk. Hello, happy Friday. I'm Alex Cox and welcome to Findmypast Fridays Live, our weekly show about all things family history and all things interesting to family historians. Yes, I can see the view. I can see the views go up. Hello, hello. So if you're wondering why I'm Audrey, hello Audrey. Yeah, I know you're getting a more close-up view of me this week than normal. That's because Max has gone to a wedding and has left me in the lurch. So if this is, I mean, I can't pretend we're some kind of well-oiled broadcasting machine, but if this is slightly more haphazard than usual, I do apologise. It's because I'm manning the controls as well as talking. So I have a newfound appreciation for everything that Max does off camera. But yes, thank you for joining. If anyone's tuning in for the first time, my name is Alex Cox and I host these discussions every week. And the whole point of them is to basically share the latest news about what's going on at Findmypast, discuss some interesting family history topics, but more importantly, answer your questions. Just seen a few highs coming through. Hello, Nicole. Hello, Greg. Hello, Nick. Hello, Sandra. Thank you for tuning in. As always, very nice to see you here again. And I must admit, I've been a bit nervous about doing this one on my own, so I hope it all goes very smoothly. But yes, as I said, do get your comments in. For once, I can actually see them coming in live, which is a bit of a treat for me, because normally, obviously, I'm just stood at the front in front of a camera. So I almost feel like this is more interactive than usual. But no, it's lovely to be here. So this week I will be discussing a few interesting announcements and developments over at the Findmypast headquarters. And then I thought I'd talk a little bit about coal mining ancestors, because my maternal family line is all up around Halifax in Yorkshire, and my mum is actually going up to Halifax this weekend, and it just made me think about my Halifax ancestors and how many of them were coal miners and worked in the coal mining industry, and that led me to do a little bit of reading, and I kind of started to realise how big mining was as a part of British history. I mean, I always knew it was a big part of history, but I didn't know quite how big it was, because so many of us, even if you haven't found them yet, particularly if you have ancestors from areas where there were big mines, are probably going to have at least one or two miners somewhere in your family tree. But anyway, before we get to coal mines, what are the latest developments? Well, it is Friday, so that means I've got to stop looking at myself. I can never normally see myself on screen, and I can this time, and it's very disconcerting. So I'm just going to make an effort to stare at the camera and not myself. I'm not being vain, I promise. I'm just becoming aware of how unsymmetrical certain parts of my face are. But no, so yeah, it's Friday, which means we have lots of new records, as we do every Friday. And this week it's heavily populated by memorial inscriptions. So we've got over 26,000 memorial inscriptions from Montgomeryshire in Wales, and they cover the years 1577 to 2016. We've got some from Dorset as well. Apologies for my appalling attempt at an accent. And that's more than 100,000 inscriptions, but not just taken from headstones. They're taken from tombs, monuments, even stained glass windows, which have been found across 200 parishes across the county. We've also got memorial inscriptions from Kent Folkestone Cheriton Road Cemetery, and there's about 112,000 records there, so pretty large. And then we've also added more records to our collections of Yorkshire baptisms and burials. So we've added over 14,000 new baptisms and burials, and they span from 1744 all the way up to 1992, and they cover the North Northerham Independent Chapel in Calderdale, West Yorkshire. So yes, that is the records for this week. But I'll just say again, yeah, do get the comments coming in. The question of the week this week, as we're talking about coal mining, and coal mining was not the most pleasant of professions, was what unpleasant occupations did your ancestors have? Did they have anything particularly yucky? Did they do any really nasty jobs? And I believe my colleague Niall is also watching in our Irish office, Dublin office, sorry. Niall, who was on Facebook Live last week. Niall, don't think the comments are actually loading. So if you do see any that are good, any questions or comments, if you could pop them in Slack, I will keep an eye on that now. So that's a little task for Niall. Hi, Niall. Yeah, so apart from the records we've released this week, I also had two announcements that I wanted to share with you. And I'm being bit naughty here because this is very much a scoop, a Facebook Live scoop, a sneak peek. We sent out a press release today announcing a very, very exciting collection that we haven't actually messaged out to our customers yet. So you guys watching are the very, very first people to hear about this. And we will be doing a special Facebook Live looking at this in much more detail in about 2 weeks. But I just wanted to tell you this had happened, as you do tune in every week, a little bit, reward your loyalty. Yes, so today we were very excited to announce to our friends at the family history magazines and the bloggers and all the people who write about family history that we've released a massive new collection of UK electoral rolls. So if you do want to find them, we haven't advertised them yet. They are available, so you can get to them through the A to Z search. And it's called England and Wales Electoral Registers 1920 to 1932. So to give you a little bit of context, some of you may be aware that we already have a huge collection of electoral rolls from the British Library, which go from 1832 all the way up to 1932. But because they're so big, it's the single largest collection we've ever released, over 220 million names, we think. That is an estimate. You can imagine that indexing 220 million names is going to take quite some time. So to actually make them in any way searchable, when we originally released them, I think it was in 2014, they were digitized and put up in PDFs. And the search was like OCR, with optical character recognition, which is the kind of experience you get when you're searching our collection of newspapers. So while it's good in one sense, in the way that it means you can search massive volumes of text at once, it does have its quirks. So what we've done with the electoral registers is we've reprocessed the images to massively improve the quality, but we've done more than that as well. Our engineers and product people, who are very, very clever, came up with some very clever technology to pick out individual names with much greater levels of accuracy. So that means we've basically indexed them so they're accurately searchable for probably the first time. And they've gone live today. So yeah, we'll be sharing more about this in the coming weeks. But the reason we are particularly excited is because they're an amazing census substitute, and this will fill that vital gap in records left by the destruction of the 1931 census. So when you combine these with, so they run from 1920 up to 1932. And when you combine this with the 1911 census and the 1939 register, it means, you've got really good record coverage now for a period that has been traditionally pretty problematic for family historians. Lots of people get stuck between 1911 and 1939 because there isn't really much out there in the way of online records. But hopefully these new indexed electoral registers will fix that. So yeah, Audrey, she said she can hear me. Fantastic. And I've actually got the comments working again as well. So I'm going to have a look at what some of you are saying. And I just see that Niall, thank you, Niall, has popped a link to the record set in the comments. But as I said, this is a real scoop. We haven't told any of our other customers about this yet. You are the first people to know. So please try them out. The reason we announced to bloggers and magazines a little bit earlier was we do want to get people using them, because if the response is good, which we hope it will be, and you guys do find these really, really useful, we will probably be doing a lot more of this with our other PDF-based record sets. So there you go, straight from the horse's mouth. Bit of a scoop. Our massive record set. I think it's over 43 million records covering that, tricky gap, 1920 to 1932. So I hope we haven't ruined your plans for the weekend, but follow that link, get online and have a search. So let's see what some people are saying. Hello, Linda Salter from Salisbury. Hello, Pat Allen. They posted the info. Oh, Pat, they stole my thunder. Sorry to hear that. Well, I'm still glad. I still hope some of the people here won't have heard about it. But we're very, very excited about it. And I'm really pleased to hear that they were already posting. So it shows that the genealogy press are excited about it as we are. Michelle Hunter, hello. Leo, hello. Sue Poli Eliza, hello. Neil Hancock. Hello, Neil. Nick Hancock. Sorry, Nick. I know your name. Hello, Nick. Hello to everybody, and thank you for tuning in. And as I said before, let us know about your ancestors' awful jobs. I see that Ainley Thomas has said unpleasant jobs other than coal miners. Had a dyer in my family, which I believe wasn't very nice. No, dying as an industry by all accounts was not a very pleasant one or fragrant one to work in. I actually think it wasn't in my family tree, but one of the worst occupations I think I've come across in research is people who worked at the chemical works, which was a big industry before this First World War. And I was reading about how young a lot of these men died. They were working with like really horrible chemicals like gypsum and things like that. And many of them died young. And there's actually a folk song called the Chemical Workers' Song, which is all about the experiences of these men working in these horrible, hellish factories. And I can't remember all the words, but I remember the chorus is, "Go, boys, go. They'll time your every breath. And every day we spend in here, we're 2 days nearer death." It's quite chilling, isn't it? And it sums up, how awful many of the occupations our ancestors had, because health and safety is a relatively modern thing. So before we get on to coal miners, I also wanted to tell you about a new feature which won't be live for everyone yet, but you will be seeing more of it in the coming weeks, which is we are expanding our related records feature. So we launched this on census records in 1939 transcripts a while back, and basically what it does is we use the technology that basically pulls hints out on your family tree. So if you've used a family tree on Findmypast and you've been getting hints, it's exactly the same technology that Hints uses. But rather than just limiting it to family trees, because of course not everyone who uses Findmypast keeps their family tree on Findmypast, so we want these people who don't have a tree to benefit from this technology as well. We've started incorporating it into our transcripts as well. So it pulls across any record that falls under the category of census, birth, marriage, death, or military is captured by this hinting. I'm not technical enough to know the real words, but you get the picture. We've expanded it now. So when you start viewing records, the related records section of the transcripts is becoming more obvious. You've got more options. So you'll see options to upload to your tree. You'll see options to correct mistranscriptions, but you'll also see options to view people of the same name who appear in the other record sets that's covered by this hinting technology. So we just think it's hopefully an easier way of you finding ancestors that you may not even be aware of, or ones you've been looking for and may not have found. So watch this space. More will be revealed in the coming weeks, and more of you will start seeing it as you're searching the website. And I think on September the 14th, we're going to see if we can convince some of the guys on the product and engineering teams to do a pre-recorded video for you to explain a little bit more about the clever technology behind the new electoral registers collection, and also some of the clever tech behind related records, because it is, I'm sure many of you find it as interesting as I do. I find a lot of this behind the scenes stuff is genuinely fascinating. I might not understand it all, but it is very, very interesting indeed. So before I start talking about the mines, let's see what more comments we've had. So, VC Howard said, does that cover all the UK, please? And I'm pretty sure you're relating to the collection of electoral registers. It doesn't, there are gaps. It's not, there are gaps in the records. I think it might cover, at the moment, it might cover all constituencies from A to L, but I might be wrong there. But if you do want to find out a little bit more, if you go to the search page for our bigger collection of electoral rolls, which is England and Wales electoral registers 1832 to 1932, and you scroll down to the bottom of the search page, there'll be all the contextual information there, which will tell you, which basically breaks down exactly where the gaps in the records are. If Niall's watching, he may be able to ping a link in the comments, so you can just view that straight away. They do cover most of the UK, but obviously there are gaps in there. And what I was going to say as well before, the great thing about electoral registers is because they, unlike censuses, they weren't taken every 10 years. They were taken every year. Every 2 years, they were taken every year, and occasionally biannually as well. So they're an amazing way of tracking your ancestors between the census years, but also just a really good way of finding out the chronology of who was living in your house. I mean, pretty much everyone in the office here has done it. You put in your home address and you can see who was living there over the years, and that's interesting in itself. Because you can get an idea of how demographics of areas change. So like where one of my grandparents used to live, it used to be really working class, and then it got more affluent and affluent as time went on. So yeah, all these interesting, cool things you can do. So Ruth Bear Mason, hello Ruth. Have blacksmiths and stonemasons working near the mines in the north. Some of their in-laws were miners. Yeah, I can imagine being a blacksmith can't be the most comfortable job. Working in furnacing, working in front of burning hot furnaces all day, and I imagine burns were a pretty common occurrence. Jan Rocket, hello Jan. Christina Sava, hello. Where's the link? The link should be further up in the comment. Anita Greaves, gold miner in India. Ooh, that sounds rather interesting. I'd like to know more about that. Natalie West, a tanner was a very unpleasant job. Yeah, was that because they were working with lots of urine or something, I believe? I think it was quite a smelly one, wasn't it? Had to write an OU exam about it. It was nearly sick, I can imagine. Oh, ordered a rag sorter and a paper mill. I don't think the rags were that clean when they came in. No, I doubt they will. I imagine people got ill quite a lot doing this kind of thing. And Chris Lang has just commented and said, searching PDFs does need improving on the site, especially for our directories, which are hard to use and get sensible results. You can't browse through them either. That is a fantastic piece of feedback, Chris, and I will be passing that on to the product teams, because as I said, if the re-indexing, or not even re-indexing, if the indexing of these electoral rolls proves really popular and they do prove to be a hit, I think we very much would like to extend this out to other PDF sets. So thank you very much for letting us know, and I will definitely make sure the team know about that. But wow, you can tell when Max isn't here because I just waffle. Max is very good at getting me to keep it to the point, because I haven't even started talking about coal mining yet, or as I was going to call this section, going underground, like the Jam song. If Max was here with his fancy technology, we probably would have even played a little bit of intro music. But no, coal mining. So if, like me, your forebears worked below the earth, the good news is you can unearth heaps and heaps and heaps of information about them. And it's not just in the usual places you'd expect, like obviously censuses are a big one, vital records, parish records that list the occupations of parents, because what you'll find, working class, mining communities were pretty much always working class communities, and one of the key distinguishing things about working class communities is they often tended to be very static, so they didn't move that far, and the occupations would go from generation to generation. So you'll find parish registers in mining towns where fathers are, generation after generation, it's son of a coal miner, son of a coal miner, son of a coal miner, son of a coal miner. But now, as I said before, the scale of mining in Britain, particularly during the 19th century, was absolutely vast. During the 19th century, Britain was a major world power, one of the leading industrial nations on the planet. And to fuel that, tons and tons of coals were needed to power the factories, foundries, and mills of industrial Britain. So, as you can imagine, the number of men engaged in this kind of work was staggering, because up until, fairly recently, it was all done by hand. They didn't have the machinery to do this. So it's one of the facts I found interesting. You can tell I've done a bit of reading on this, and I've got kind of carried away. It was as late as 1900, only 1% of the coal being cut in the UK, and there was a lot being cut, was cut by machine. Only 1%. The remaining 99% was cut by hand. And again, to give you an idea of the scale of it, so by 1913, when people were still pretty much just using picks and shovels, more than 1 million men in the UK were producing 280 million tons of coal a year. I just find that crazy when you think now that the coal industry is virtually non-existent in this country now. Sip of tea. But the history of coal mining goes back so far. I mean, coal's been mined in Britain since Roman times, and pits have evolved over time. So, as you could probably imagine, when it first started, pits were very shallow, and they expanded as coal became the domestic fuel choice. But eventually, as these shallow seams were dug up, miners were driven further and further and further underground to explore deeper, more generous, but also much more dangerous sources of coal. And another thing about coal mining, which is interesting as well, is the transformative effect it has on the regions where it was practiced. So, a lot of, even before the Industrial Revolution, lots of rural parishes were completely transformed when coal was found. So, famous mining towns like Barnsley, Goldthorpe, Mexborough, Elscar, Bentley, Lofthouse. If there's any people from Lancashire who are shaking their head at the way I pronounce that, I'm sorry. These were originally fairly isolated rural parishes, and then coal was found, and people flock in looking for work, and it just exploded. And again, don't think that coal mining is a 19th century, 18th century thing. So it was big even in the 16th century. So even in the 16th century, in Northumbria alone, coalfields in Northumbria alone, because they had really easy access to North Sea ports, were shipping 163,000 tons of coal a year to Elizabethan London. So that gives you an idea of the scale of coal consumption in Elizabethan London. In the cities must have stank. And it also gives you an idea of even back in the 1500s, there were a lot of people digging up coal, and and again, up until the Industrial Revolution, a lot of these coal mining towns were based near the coast because easy access to ports and shipping was very important. But that all changed with the arrival of the railways, and that meant that collieries could be founded much further inland. And because the transportation of these raw goods and materials was much easier, and that's when you saw even more coal fields spring up in the likes of the Midlands and further into northern England. So that's kind of my whistle stop tour of the history of it. It all kind of started to go south after the First World War, because when the war broke out in 1914, coal exports basically ceased overnight, completely ceased, and they never returned to their pre-war levels. And then straight after the First World War, you had the Depression, the 1920s Depression, which completely wreaked havoc across all British industries, and coal mining was no exception. And then in 1947, obviously the industry was nationalised, but that didn't do anything to halt the decline. And then I'm sure we all know the story of Margaret Thatcher's policies, the strikes of the 80s, and when the British coal mining industry kind of stopped. So I mean, it's mad to think that something that had such a long legacy in this country and was such a central part of British life for such a long period of time kind of just withered out and died relatively quickly. But onto search tips. So now you've got an idea of the scale. There's a very good chance that some of your ancestors were down the mines, but how do you go about finding them? Well, the obvious choice, first off, is census records. I know that's pretty self-explanatory, but I'd be doing you a disservice if I didn't mention them at least. And as I'm sure you're all aware, you've got census records from 1841 going all the way up to 1911, but then you've also got the 1939 register. And yeah, looking at coal mining, or not just coal mining, mining of any sort in the censuses is very revealing, because again, it gives you an idea of the crazy scale of it. So in the 1911 census, coal mining was the third most common occupation for men in Britain, with 1.3 million, 971,000 men being registered as coal miners. So that only came behind domestic servants, because obviously, working in big houses and working in domestic service was the biggest employer back then. And then after that, it was agriculture, 1.2 million. Third was coal mining. And do you remember what I said before about it never returning to its pre-war levels after the First World War? You see that in the 1939 register, because by 1939, it's dropped down to the 8th most common occupation for men. So you can kind of see that, change in British society just through records. But another thing you notice in censuses as well is, when I said before about working class communities being really static, that's not always true, because of course often whole communities would have to leave in search of work, and you do see that particularly with mining. So for example, in Cornwall and Devon, where it was more metal mining than coal mining, tin mining and things like that. When the tin mining industry fell into decline, hundreds and hundreds of mining families had to leave Cornwall and headed north to the north of England or to South Wales in search for other mining jobs. And a good example of this is the village of Roos in Cumbria. So Roos was actually built around the local colliery. The village was built to house employees. But in the 1881 census, if you have a look at along with all the names, ages, occupations, the 1881 census shows that 70% of the village was born in Cornwall. So 70% of the people there were economic migrants and had left all together in a big block in search of work. So, that's just an interesting little thing to look out for in the censuses. But apart from censuses, what else is there? Well, there's worker records for mines and collieries themselves. I'm sure there are various odd collections dotted around online, but I don't know exactly where they are. I'd say if you're looking for worker records or colliery registers, the best place to look is local or municipal archives. So that I think there's also a good section on the National Archives website. If Audrey's watching, she could probably point you in the right direction, which will give you a guide to how to access offline mining records, and it'll tell you what they have. But to give you an example, say there was lots of mining in Cheshire. So the Cheshire and Chester Archives and Local Studies Centre, sorry, a bit of a mouthful, they have all the employee registers for Cheshire's Poynton Colliery, which was a big one. Same with the Tyne and Wear Archives Centre. They've got a really great guide to local industry records for the northeast of England. So yeah, if you're looking for records for a specific colliery, employment registers, I'd say go online. And what was my other tip? Accident reports as well. They're another great way of finding out about your mining ancestors, because they may have been, if they were caught up in a terrible accident, of which there were many, they may have well been named in an accident report. And as I said, there were a lot. So until the introduction of effective health and safety measures, which didn't come for a long time, mining was horrifically dangerous. So not only were you at risk of the tunnel collapsing or flooding, but getting blown to smithereens was a very, very real possibility. So until a very, very clever man named Humphrey Davy invented the miner's safety lamp in 1815, explosions were an ever, ever present risk. Because all it would take would be for an accumulation of methane gas, or fire damp as they'd call it, one quick spark, bang, every man in the tunnel's killed. So a famous example would be in 1700 at a colliery near Chesterley Street in County Durham. There was a massive explosion 342 feet below ground, and it killed all 69 men, women and children down there, including an entire family of 5. So even after the lamp was introduced, despite its protective features, there explosions were still a massive cause of fatalities. And if you do want to find out more about them, we actually have a record set based all around mining disasters, which is called England Mining Disaster Victims. And if Niall's watching, I'd be very grateful, Niall, if you could pop a link in the comments. And this was a record set created by our very own Miko Cleland. And they're transcript only, but if your ancestor was killed or injured in a mining accident, you'll probably find them in here. So you'll find things like their name, their birth year, their age, the date of the event, the colliery it happened, and details surrounding the incident itself. And that covers collieries in Derbyshire, Leicestershire, Nottinghamshire, and Yorkshire. There's also a very good website called the Alan Beale's Database of Fatalities in Coalfields, which is also another great resource for finding out about it. But also newspapers. Newspapers are probably one of the best ways of finding out about it. Our newspaper archive is packed with reports of mining disasters, not just big ones, small scale incidences of people being crushed by machinery where there's only one fatality. You'll still find very detailed reports in local papers. So newspaper reports, our England Mining Disaster Victims, and check out Alan Beale's Database of Fatalities in Coalfields. It makes for grim reading. So I was having a browse through our through our collection of mining disaster victims. I found records for 26 children who'd lost their lives at the Huskar pit disaster in 1838, as well as 88 men who died in the Cadeby mine pit disaster in 1912. And that one was a particularly tragic one because the initial explosion killed 38 men. But when the rescue party was sent in, there was another explosion which killed even more people than the initial explosion. It killed 53 of the rescue workers. So you see how, God, I have real admiration for these blokes who went down there day in, day out. I couldn't do it. I certainly couldn't do it. So yeah, those are my tips for tracking down mining ancestors. If you do have any that I haven't mentioned, please pop them in the comments, because I'm going to have a look at all the comments you've sent through in a sec. That's what I wanted to say. Yes, when I've been talking about mining ancestors, I'm not being fair when I keep on saying men, because you will also find loads of women and children down. Well, you might not necessarily find them, but loads of women and children were down in the mines as well. So it wasn't uncommon for women and children to be deep underground until 1842, when it was made illegal. So what women were often employed doing was they were doing a lot of digging themselves, but mainly they'd be employed to carry coal in baskets on their backs, to climb it out the stairs and take the coal up. Because of course it all had to be done by hand. Elsewhere they hold wagons in teams of 4. They'd have a chains around their waist. They'd have to do this through really low passages. So you can imagine how taxing this would be on the body. And again, women were often caught up in these terrible disasters. So in Silkstone near Barnsley, there was a really nasty mine explosion in 1805, and seven girls, not even women, girls aged 9 to 17 years old, died in a tragic flooding in a moorside pit in 1838. And to give you an idea of how many women were working in the mines before it was made illegal, in 1841 there were 2,350 women employed in the coal mines of the UK, and 1/3 of those women could be found in Lancashire. Shows you gives you a bit of insight into Lancashire's mining history. And children were not spared either. So in 1842, the government did a big inquest into the conditions of working in the mines, and the public was horrified to learn the true extent of the numbers of women and children down there doing this backbreaking and incredibly dangerous work. And you can actually read the report in detail on the British Library's website for free. So just Google British Library 1842 Royal Commission on Mining, and you'll find it. And it's got illustrations in there, and it's really, really interesting read. I was browsing through it on my lunch break and had to tear myself away because I was getting very engrossed. But some of the things I found, just to give you an example of what the conditions were like. So evidence collected in the West Riding of Yorkshire showed the youngest person found by the Royal Commission working in the mines was 5. They had a 5-year-old working down the mines. And there was another one in Halifax that mentioned a father who would regularly take his 3-year-old child down the mines with him. And the report said the child was made to follow him in the workings there, to hold a candle, and when exhausted with fatigue, was cradled upon the coals until his returns at night. So yeah, it's staggering to think about, isn't it? So that all ended in 1842 when they introduced the Mines Act, and that outlawed underground employment of all females and boys below the age of 10. And as I said, if you want to learn more about it, search for the Royal Commission in our newspaper collection, and also go on the British Library's website and you can read the report in full. So I'm going to have a look at your comments. I hope I've done a good job flying solo this week. Max's absence has been keenly felt. Right, sorry, I'm just getting up some comments. Oh, so I've already. We've had some great ones coming through. So Sue Pooley Eliza, my great uncle was killed in a mine accident, and his tombstone was modelled in the shaft as a symbol of how he died. Whoa, that's really amazing. Sue, have you found them in the newspapers? If you have, I'd love to read a report on it. If you wouldn't mind popping it in the comments, or you can send it to me privately. You can private message it in. And Patricia Clues has made a very good point. And she said the Mining Museum at Wakefield have a very, very good website. Yeah, there's some fantastic Mining Museum websites out there. I mean, again, apart from family history websites, Google is your friend if you're looking for mining ancestors, because there's some really, really fantastic resources online. Whoa, the comments have been coming thick and fast. So Amy Thomas, again, I'm so sorry if I'm saying your name wrong, has shared a handy link for Scottish mining. Thank you very much. Oh, and Pat Allen. Hello, Pat. Pat Allen said, my uncle died in a mine near Doncaster. He was aged 16 and his father died of miner's lung. Wow. Yeah. I mean, it took such a toll on so many families, generation upon generation of lives cut short by these awful conditions, working deep underground. So Natalie West has said, history tended to ignore women in these kind of industries until the end of the 20th century. So many women and children suffered even after 1842. Thank you very much, Natalie, for clearing that up. That is really, really interesting to hear. I'm going to have to do a bit more digging about that. I've found myself being, not just because my ancestors worked down the mines, but I think because the history is so grim. I've found myself developing a bit of a morbid fascination for this. So I think I'm going to be doing a bit of reading about this over the weekend. Let's see what other comments we've got coming through. Oh, Miko. Hi, Miko. Yeah, Miko is a bit of an authority on my mining ancestors because, as I said, the Mining Disasters collection was his own creation. So Miko said, I have a relation who died in the Blantyre mining disaster and can't forget my ancestor who was buried for a week underground in the Cherry mining disaster. Take a look at the end and read all about William Bell. Oh, no, that is a great story. What Miko is referencing there, I think, is that your ancestry kept more going with songs. If you've got any more information, you point people in the direction of that Miko, that'd be great because Miko's related that to me and it is an incredible story. I think someone's trying to invade my meeting room. Don't worry. So what else have we had? Janet Whitaker, hello Janet. My grandfather's brother was killed in the Billsthorpe colliery disaster in 1927. Would like to know more. Also, my grandfather had a very lucky escape in a disaster in Glamorganshire. So many comments coming through. Our ancestors caught up in mining disasters. I think it just proves my point about what a dangerous occupation it was and how many people were down the mines. I think we might have to revisit this subject at some point. It seems to be a popular one. So many comments. Again, I'm sorry I won't have time to go through all of them. I love seeing all this. Thanks so much for contributing, guys. Karen Harvey, I want to trace Methodist archives, how they support mining communities. My ancestors were very much part of the religion back 6 generations for myself. Ooh, off the top of my head, I don't think I've got a really handy answer for that one. I'd say go to our A to Z of records, type in Methodist and see what comes back. I believe we do have some Methodist records. There'll probably be handy websites about Methodist history, but I mean, as a kind of cure-all, newspapers are always quite a good place to look. Rocco Gibraltar. Hello, Rocco. That's a good name. My family have a big mining tradition. Almost all of my family were miners until they were 18 years old. The scale of it. I know I keep on repeating myself, but considering the industry is virtually non-existent in this country anymore, to think it employed so many people and was just such a massive part of so many of our ancestors' lives, I do find quite staggering. So Cindy Pennington, my ancestors came from St Helens, Lancashire. Well, it's a lot, yeah, coal mining country. As she said, lots of coal miners and a few worked in the chemical works. It was horrendous, and the houses were damaged due to corrosive effects of chemicals in the air. If the houses are being damaged, imagine what that's doing to your lungs. So you can imagine what it did to their health. His grandfather was a coal miner and well on to protest marches in the 1980s as the pits closed, and I'm glad to hear it. I might have to leave it there because I've been waffling on. If Max was here, he'd be tearing his hair out. He likes me to go for 20 minutes and I've been going for 40. Can't leave me on my own. Before I go, Michelle Watson, hello. Oh, watching from Oz. My suburb here in Oz had so many Welsh-speaking miners. They conducted funerals in Welsh. Yes, that's something I wish I mentioned. Yeah, so many miners obviously went overseas as well. I remember my stepfather-in-law was like a big hippie in the 60s and hitchhiked through America in the 60s. And he found himself in some really isolated community up in the mountains in Pennsylvania or something where they're all miners. And again, it was one of those miners where everyone had come over from Wales at once to staff mines. And he said, even in the 1960s, I mean, the area was very cut off. Some of them still had slight hints of a Welsh accent and still used very Welsh-sounding phrases, which he found quite staggering. And yeah, that is amazing. That's a really interesting point. How many of these communities left en masse and went over to what was then the colonies. So to Australia, they went to Canada or New Zealand, or they went over to America in search of their fortune. But yeah, massive thanks to everyone who's watched. And I've seen a few people say, "Well done, Alex." Well, I'm glad I did a good job. And we will be back again next week. Ruth, that's great. Ruth said, I love your 40 minutes. Tell Max 20 minutes is not enough. That's what I've been campaigning for. So thank you very much. Oh, and Amy Thomas has said, a lot of my mining family converted to Mormonism and moved to Utah. It sounds like you know a thing or two about mining ancestors, because I have seen a few of your comments come through. I haven't seen all of them, so I'm going to be reading through this. But thank you so much for contributing and sharing your knowledge, and thank you to everybody else who has also commented. So yes, I will be back again next week. Before I go, I wanted to actually ask for recommendations, because we've been doing this for over a year now, I think, and I'm quite conscious of the fact that some weeks I'm recovering old ground, and I don't want these to get repetitive. I don't want them to get boring. I want them to continue to be fresh and interesting. Ooh, I didn't say that very well. Fresh and interesting. So if you have any topics I haven't covered yet that you think I should, pop them in the comments and I will take a look. But yeah, thank you so much for joining me this week. Have marvellous weekends. Give our electoral registers, new electoral registers a try, and I will see you again next Friday. Bye-bye. Have lovely weekends. Bye. Oh, this is where I need Max. Not a smooth ending. Bye-bye. This is bye for real. Bye-bye.